And if you gas lon into an abyss, the abyss also gases into you. Nietzsche. Almost everyone thinks they can read people, until someone disappoints them, betrays them, or changes overnight without explanation. Then they say, I never imagined they were like this. But the truth is more uncomfortable. The signs were always there. What was lacking wasn't the information, it was a way of seeing. Because seeing isn't the same as observing, and listening isn't the same as understanding. Most people hear words, very few perceive human structures. Most people spend their entire lives learning to speak, but almost no one learns to observe. From a young age, we are taught to answer questions, to give the right response, to sound polite, to say I'm fine even when we're not. We're trained to produce words, not to decipher them. That's why so many adults, even intelligent ones, remain so usually naive. They hear phrases, but they don't see people. They trust explanations, but they don't understand motivations. And that's where almost all emotional mistakes begin. Friendships that disappoint, relationships that suddenly change, partners who weren't what they seemed. It's not that the world is full of surprises, it's that almost no one was trained to notice what was always right in front of them. Reading someone isn't about guessing their past or becoming distrustful. It's about noticing the gap between what someone says and what their behavior repeats. For example, someone might claim they don't care what people think of them but they check their phone every 5 minutes seeking approval, change their mind depending on the group, and get uncomfortable when they don't receive attention. Words speak of independence, patterns scream neediness. If you only listen to the words, you believe the mask. If you observe the repetition, you see the person's inner workings. And inner workings almost never lie, because they are unconscious. No one taught you this because society operates on superficial agreements. If everyone said exactly what they felt, many relationships would collapse. Masks aren't inherently evil, they are a mechanism for social survival. A person don't hide their insecurity because they want to deceive you, they hide it because they fear rejection. Someone don't fake confidence out of malice, but because they feel their worth depends on how others perceive them. Understanding this completely changes the way you see others. You no longer see just attitudes, you see defenses. You no longer see only arrogance, you see a fear of being small. You no longer see only coldness, you see a fear of being hurt. This perspective don't make you naive, it makes you precise. Relying solely on words is one of the most costly social mistakes. Words are social tools, not X-rays of the soul. People use words to fit in, to avoid conflict, to protect their image, to convince themselves. Observe how someone speaks of loyalty but changes their stance when the environment changes. Listen to how someone says they had drama but is always surrounded by conflict. Notice those who promise calm but life reacting intensely. Contradictions are not accidents, they are clues. True coherence is in how someone acts when tired, frustrated, ignored, or under pressure. There is no polished performance there is their true emotional makeup. There is an uncomfortable truth about human nature that many prefer not to accept. Most people don't truly know themselves. They don't always lie intentionally. Often, they speak from an idealized version of themselves. They say, I'm not jealous, until they feel threatened. They say, it don't affect me until they feel displeased. They say, I'm calm until they lose control. They aren't consciously pretending. They are speaking from the image they need to believe in to feel good about themselves. That's why, if you take every statement as absolute truth, you age life in confusion. On the other hand, if you understand that people often describe their intentions but reveal their reality through their reactions, you age begin to see clearly. Understanding someone isn't about analyzing their every gesture like an interrogator. It's about noticing patterns without immediately judging them. Imagine someone who always interrupts when others are talking about their accomplishments. You don't need to confront them to understand something. The repeated interruptions indicate discomfort at not being the center of attention, possibly constant comparison, perhaps a self-esteem that depends on standing out. This understanding allows you to interact intelligently. You know that competing head-on will trigger their insecurity, but acknowledging their contribution can soften their defensiveness. You didn't manipulate them. You understood the emotional landscape. The opposite is also true. Some people hardly ever talk about themselves, deflect praise, and feel uncomfortable when they receive attention. At first glance, they seem humble, sometimes they are. Other times, There is a fear of putting themselves out there, a fear of not measuring up, a fear of being judged. If you only look at the surface, you might say, what a simple person. But if you look deeper, you will see that perhaps they avoid standing out to avoid feeling pressured. That difference changes how you approach them. You don't push them too hard, you create a safe space. Reading someone involves observing what situations shift their energy. When do they tense up? When do they expand? With whom do they transform? A person might be confident with friends but rigid with authority figures. They might be generous when in control but reactive when challenged. These shifts aren't random, they reveal their wounds, their needs, their fears. People are consistent in their inconsistencies. If you know where someone becomes unstable, you know where their mask weakens. Most conflicts arise from interpreting words literally and behavior superficially. Someone says, do whatever you want, but their tone, posture, and subsequent silence say otherwise. Another claims, it's nothing but their emotional distance increases. Those who only hear the phrase are confused. Those who observe the whole picture understand that something is left unsaid. The body, the energy, the repetition of the thoughts reveal what the words often. Truly understanding someone requires something few are willing to do, tolerating what don't fit with your preconceived image of them. Accepting that someone can be insecure. That someone strong can be afraid. That someone charismatic can feel empty. That someone cold can be protecting themselves from an old wound. This perspective don't destroy relationships, it makes them more real, because you're no longer connecting with the mask, but with the human being beneath. And at that point, something crucial happens. You start to stop taking everything personally. If someone reacts with exaggerated anger, you no longer automatically think, he did something unforgivable but rather, he touched a nerve that perhaps existed before me. If someone constantly seeks attention, you no longer see it merely as a nuisance, but as someone trying to maintain their self-esteem. This don't mean condoning disrespect, but rather understanding its root cause in order to act with fairness and clarity, not from a place of confusion. Understanding someone, at its core, means seeing their invisible struggle. Every person is trying to protect something, their self-worth, their image, their sense of control, their fear of not being enough. When you observe from this perspective, the social world ceases to seem chaotic and begins to reveal patterns. And when you see patterns, you no longer react impulsively, you choose how to respond. That's where the quality of all your relationships changes, not because you control others, but because you are no longer dominated by what you don't understand. But before we continue, let me know in the comments what city you're listening to this audiobook from, and if this message resonates with you, please like and share this. This way you make sure you don't miss any content that nourishes your mind and brings you closer each day to the life you truly deserve. There is no time to lose. Now, let's continue. Block 1. What people hide, human masks. Truth número 1. Nobody shows who they really are. People present edited versions of themselves. Everyone you meet is presenting an edited version of themselves, not because the world is a theater full of liars, but because public identity is always an adaptation to the environment. From the moment someone learns that certain parts of their personality are better received than others, a silent selection process begins. This is shown, this is not, this generates approval, this generates rejection. Over time, this editing ceases to be conscious and becomes their visible personality. What you see isn't a complete falsehood, but it's not the whole picture either. It's a version optimized for social survival. Observe how someone changes depending on the context. The person who is confident with their friends can become rigid in the presence of an authority figure. The one who seems dominant in a group can be insecure in intimate relationships. The one who is always joking can use humor to mask their vulnerability. These aren't contradictions, they are liars. Each environment activates a different part of them because each social space involves different risks. Rejection, judgment, loss of status, abandonment. The human mind adjusts its expression to minimize these risks, even unconsciously. This is especially noticeable when someone feels their worth is being evaluated. In interviews, on dates, in important meetings, or in front of people they admire, the editing intensifies. Their tone of voice changes, their posture adjusts, their opinions are softened or exaggerated. Not because they want to deceive, but because they want to be accepted. The problem is that if you only know someone in context where they reacting out their most protected version, you will believe that's their true self. But their true self emerges when the person is tired, frustrated, relaxed, or under pressure. That's when the editing weakens. Social media is a clear example of this edited version. Most posts show as achievements, happy moments, security, and clarity. Unfiltered confusion, insecurity, or failure are rarely seen. Then, when someone in real life don't match that image, it's a they change. In reality, it was always more complex. You were just looking at a shop window, not the inner storehouse. This phenomenon isn't limited to the internet. It occurs in everyday conversations where people display their strengths and hide their vulnerabilities. Understanding that no one shows their whole self changes how you interpret behavior. If someone seems overly confident, they might be hiding a fear of not being good enough. If someone is extremely accommodating, they might be avoiding rejection at all costs. If someone appears cold, perhaps they learn that showing emotion made them vulnerable. When you only see the surface, you label. When you understand that there is editing involved, you look for the reason behind it. You do it too. Everyone edits. Everyone shows their most acceptable side and protects their more sensitive side. Recognizing this don't breed constant distrust, but rather emotional realism. You're no longer surprised that someone acts differently in another context. You understand that you're seeing another layer. This understanding prevents you from idealizing too quickly and being disappointed later. Reading someone begins with understanding that what you see is a presentation, not a complete portrait. Like a trailer trying to summarize a much longer film. If you mistake the preview for the whole story, you will be wrong. But if you remember that there are always things you haven't seen, you will observe more attentively, with less judgment and greater accuracy. That's when you begin to get closer to the real person, the one who exists beneath the version they will learn to project. Truth número 2. The mask protects insecurities. All exaggerated behavior is a defense. Behind almost all exaggerated behavior lies something the person is trying to conceal. Psychological exaggeration don't appear out of nowhere, it's a compensatory mechanism. When someone feels the need to overexpose a quality, too much confidence, too much toughness, too much independence, too much superiority, they are usually masking the opposite feeling. It's not conscious theatricality most of the time. It's an automatic defense mechanism activated to protect a vulnerable area of their identity. Think about extreme arrogance. True confidence don't need to be constantly proclaimed. Someone comfortable with their word don't feel the urge to prove it in every conversation. On the other hand, the person who interrupts to stand out, who turns every topic into a competition, who can't tolerate not being the center of attention, is usually battling an internal sense of inadequacy. The external noise compensates for the internal silence they're afraid to acknowledge. Their mask isn't meant to deceive you, it's meant to prevent anyone from touching on that insecurity they don't even always recognize. The same applies to exaggerated coolness. Some people appear emotionally distant, excessively rational, almost impervious. Sometimes this is interpreted as strength, but often it's armor. If showing emotion in the past brought pain, rejection, or humiliation, the mind learns that feeling openly is dangerous. Then the mask of indifference appears. It's not an absence of emotion, it's a fear that emotion will be used against them. The more rigid the armor, the more likely it is that there was a wound that justified it. Constant humor can also be a defense mechanism. Some people can't stand deep conversations about themselves and respond with jokes whenever something becomes personal. Laughter diverts attention, lightens the mood, and prevents someone from exploring their vulnerability. From the outside, it appears to be charisma. Internally, it might be discomfort with showing oneself without protection. In this case, the exaggeration is a permanent lightheartedness that prevents genuine connection. Even extreme kindness can be a mask. People who never say no, who are always available, who avoid any conflict. At first glance, they seem generous, but often they are protecting themselves from rejection. They have learned that their worth depends on being helpful or agreeable. Saying no would risk acceptance. So their defense is compliance. It's not pure kindness, it's fear of losing the connection if they show their boundaries. Observing these exaggerations changes how you react. If you respond to arrogance with direct confrontation, you will likely intensify the defensiveness. If you understand that insecurity lies beneath, you can demand firm without humiliating the person. If you see coolness and assume the person feels nothing, you create distance. If you recognize that it might be self-protection, you can create a space where they don't need such a tough exterior. Understanding the function of the mask doesn't mean justifying harmful behavior, but rather understanding what stands it so you don't react superficially. It's also important to notice your own exaggerations. Where do you talk too much? Where do you come across as overly harsh or overly accommodating? These areas often point to insecurity seeking protection. The mask works as long as no one questions it, but it also limits authenticity and depth connections. What protects you also separates you. When you look at people from this perspective, you stop seeing used behaviors and start seeing defense mechanisms at work. Every exaggeration is a clue about what the person is trying to hide. And by recognizing that, your understanding becomes more accurate, more human, and less naive, because you realize that what's loudest is often masking what's most sensitive. Truth número 3. Public image is almost never the truth. What is visible is strategy, not essence. The image a person projects to the world is usually a strategic construct, not a complete reflection of their inner self. This doesn't imply constant malice, it implies adaptation. In any social environment, there is a silent pressure to fit in, stand out, or protect one's self-worth. Public image is born at that point of tension between who someone is and what they believe they need to show to be accepted, respected, or admired. What is visible, then, serves a purpose, to influence how one will be treated. From a very young age, people learn that certain qualities generate approval and others generate risk. Someone discovers that being strong avoids ridicule, that being funny attracts attention, that being successful earns respect, that being calm avoids conflict. Little by little, their external identity is organized around these outcomes. Not everything is shown, only what works is displayed. Thus, public image becomes a kind of emotional resume, a selection of traits designed to produce an effect. This is clearly seen in leadership figures, but also in everyday life. The professional who always appears confident might be struggling with constant doubts that they never express at work. The person who projects a perfect life might be experiencing internal pressures that don't fit into their public narrative. The one who presents themselves as independent might avoid the relationships for fear of dependence. The image communicates control, success, or clarity. The internal experience might be very different. It's not simply hypocrisy, it's a disconnect between the social role and the psychological life. The problem arises when strategy is confused with essence. If you take the public image as the whole truth, you create unrealistic expectations. Then, when the person shows signs of fatigue, insecurity, or contradiction, you feel they've changed or deceived. In reality, you're only seeing a part that wasn't included in the initial presentation. The image was designed for one scenario, real life has many more. Observing this allows you to notice when someone is managing perception rather than expressing authenticity. Subtle signs appear. Overly calculated responses, difficulty admitting mistakes, a constant need to maintain a positive narrative, and discomfort when the conversation becomes personal and uncontrollable. The person is defending their image because they feel that losing it would mean losing value. Their external strategies become a part of their internal security. Social media intensifies this phenomenon, but it didn't create it. The tendency to present an optimized version has always existed. What's new is the scale and frequency. People can maintain an image for years without almost anyone noticing what lies outside the frame. This not only deceives others, it can also disconnect the person from themselves. When someone invests too much in maintaining an image, they might begin to feel that they can't be seen outside of that persona. Reading correctly involves differentiating between role and identity. Everyone fulfills roles: professional, friend, partner, leader. A role requires certain behaviors. Identity is broader and more complex. When you know someone only in their role, you know their function, not their depths. Their essence emerges in moments when there is no audience to impress. Exhaustion, failure, intimacy, loss of control, difficult decisions. In these moments, strategy loses its power, and the human element emerges without so much filtering. Understanding that public image is a strategy gives you a quiet advantage. You're not so easily dazzled or disappointed. You look beyond the surface and expect consistency over time, not instant perfection. You recognize that what's visible serves a purpose, but you don't assume it encompasses the whole truth. In this way, your perception becomes more stable, less naive, and closer to the true complexity of people, who are always more than they show and, sometimes, less than they appear. Truth número 4. The more you boast, the more you can pensate. A noisy ego is a sign of inner emptiness. The constant need to boast rarely stems from inner fulfillment. It usually arises from a lack that a person tries to mask with noise. The ego that needs to be seen, validated, and recognized continuously isn't celebrating security, it's trying to maintain it. When someone talks endlessly about their achievements, exaggerates their importance, belittles others, or turns every conversation into a personal showcase, they aren't displaying stable strengths, but rather trying to protect a fragile self-esteem that depends on external reactions. True security is quiet because it don't need constant proof. A person who feels self-sufficient and life comparing themselves to others or measuring their worth in every interaction. In contrast, someone who constantly boasts is usually trapped in a perpetual internal comparison. They notice how they need to confirm that they are superior, that they know more, that they have more, that they are more. They can't afford the psychological respite of simply being, because deep down they fear not being enough if they stop proving themselves. This pattern appears at different levels. It can be seen in those who flaunt wealth, power, or connections to feel relevant. It can also be seen in those who boast of spirituality, knowledge, or morality to feel superior in other ways. The form changes, the function is the same. To compensate for an insecurity that don't want to be seen. The noisy ego don't seek to share genuine joy. It seeks to secure its position in an imaginary hierarchy from which it fears falling. One telling the tale is how these people react to the success of others. Instead of celebrating naturally, they tend to compete, diminish merit, or redirect attention toward themselves. The achievement of others feels like a threat, not an inspiration. This shows that their self-esteem isn't based on stable internal value, but on constant comparison. If someone else shines, they feel their own light dims. That's why they need to speak up. This is also evident in their difficulty admitting mistakes. Acknowledging a flaw would mean accepting an imperfection that their identity cannot tolerate. So they justify, blame, or gloss over the situation. It's not simply pride, it's fear that if their image of superiority shatters, nothing solid will remain beneath. The inflated ego functions as a structure that holds together an insecure identity. Understanding this changes how you interact. If you respond to a loud ego with humiliating confrontation, you will likely trigger more defenses. If you compete directly, you will feed the game that sustains their insecurity. Instead, staying calm, setting clear boundaries, and not giving in to their need for validation reduces the arena where their mask operates. It's not about reinforcing their fantasy, but about not letting yourself be drawn into it. This truth also invites us to look inward. Everyone has areas where they boast more than they actually live. Asking yourself where you constantly need to prove yourself can reveal your own insecurity seeking compensation. Sometimes external noise prevents you from hearing your inner doubts. Acknowledging this don't weaken you. On the contrary, it frees up energy that was previously invested in maintaining an image. When you understand that the loudest ego often masks an inner emptiness, you stop being so easily impressed and also stop getting irritated with the same intensity. You see the person being the performance, someone trying to convince themselves of their own worth. That don't justify harmful behavior, but it does give you clarity. And clarity allows you to respond firmly without getting caught up in the invisible competition that their insecurity tries to impose. Block 2. How to detect what is not said. Truth número 5. Words lie, patterns don't. Observe repetitions, not speeches. Words are flexible, patterns are rigid. A person can adapt their speech to the situation, choose the right words, sound convincing, even believe what they resonate in the moment. But behavioral patterns, those repetitions that appear over time, reveal the true structure from which they live. When someone says one thing but consistently does another, you're not witnessing an exception. You're seeing their behavioral truth. Many mistakes stem from giving more weight to someone's promises than to their historical actions. Someone might claim to value honesty but avoid difficult conversations. They might say they will always be there but disappear when problems arise. They might assert they don't care about money yet every decision revolves around it. Words describe a desired identity, actions reveal the actual, operational identity. The former is narrative, the latter is reality. Patterns emerge in small details. How do you handle frustration? How do you treat people who don't benefit you? How do you react when you are ignored? How do you act when no one is watching? These recurring situations form a continuous thread that isn't dependent on your mood. If someone always avoids responsibility when something goes wrong, it's not a coincidence. If they constantly seek validation before making decisions, it's not by chance. If they repeatedly find themselves in relationships with the same type of conflict, there is an underlying emotional pattern. Speech is usually conscious, patterns are largely automatic. That's why patterns are more honest. A person can defend their verbal narrative with arguments, but rarely clearly notices the repetition of their behaviors. They believe each situation is different, when from the outside, the same structure is clearly at work. This difference between self-image and repeated behavior is one of the most powerful keys to understanding someone. The same applies to you. You may think you're repentant, but if you consistently react with irritation under pressure, that's the real pattern. You may believe you're independent, but if you seek approval before every important decision, the pattern tells a different story. This isn't about judgment, but about recognizing that your true identity is revealed in what you do time and time again, not in how you define yourself. A clear example appears in relationships. Someone might say they want stability, but they are always attracted to emotionally unavailable people. The words speak of a desire for calm. The pattern reveals a familiarity with uncertainty. If you ignore the pattern and only believe the statement, you keep expecting behavior that never materializes. If you look at the repetition, you understand where that person is truly coming from. Observing patterns requires patience. It's not about drawing conclusions from a single event, but about noticing the thread that connects several similar moments. When that thread repeats itself, you're seeing something structural. Words can change from day to day. A pattern needs much more than intention to transform. By prioritizing patterns over narratives, your perception becomes more stable. You no longer get carried away by intense promises or emotional declarations that lack behavioral backing. You learn to listen, but above all, to remember. What someone does consistently is their way of being in the world. And when you look at it from that perspective, people become more understandable, less unpredictable, and more coherent in their true complexity. Truth número 6. Reactions reveal more than actions. Spontaneous emotion is the true stepping through. Actions can be planned. Reactions almost never. A person can decide what to do, how to behave, what image to project. But when something surprises, contradicts, frustrates, or hurts them, an emotional response surfaces before the mind has time to process it. That split second, a gesture, a change in tone, a glance, a tense silence, often reveals more about their inner world than our self-controlled behavior. Actions show intention, reactions show emotional structure. Someone might strive to be kind, polite, and balanced under normal circumstances. However, observe what happens when they feel ignored, criticized, or displaced. Do they become defensive? Do they lash out? Do they shut down? Do they play the victim? These responses are not usually chosen rationally. They emerge from past experiences, unresolved insecurities, and deeply ingrained defense mechanisms. For example, when someone receives mild criticism and responds with disproportionate anger, they aren't just reacting to the immediate comment. They're reacting from a past hurt where being singled out felt like a threat to their self-worth. Their reaction reveals sensitivity to judgment, fear of not being good enough, or past experiences where making mistakes had strong emotional consequences. The visible action is anger, the underlying truth is vulnerability. The same is true of envy. A person may smile at another's success, say the right things, but their spontaneous reaction, a micro gesture of discomfort, a shift in energy, a need to change the subject, reveals internal comparison. It's not always malice, sometimes it's a silent struggle with honest own self-esteem. The reaction reveals where the person feels at a disadvantage. Reactions also reveal where someone feels secure. Some people become clearer, more collaborative, or calm under pressure. This indicates an emotional structure that tolerates uncertainty. Others become disorganized in the face of minor unexpected events, suggesting a need for control to feel stable. The difference lies not in the external situation, but in the internal capacity to cope. Observing reactions requires attention to the subtle. The barely perceptible change in tone, the quickening of breathing, the closing of posture, the nervous laughter that appears for no clear reason. The body and emotions react before a conscious thought. Afterward, the person may explain, justify, or downplay what happened, but the initial reaction has already revealed something authentic. This don't mean you should judge someone based on a single emotional moment, but rather recognize that these moments reveal sensitive areas. If someone reacts with fear to uncertainty, you know they need predictability to feel secure. If they respond aggressively to vulnerability, you know that opening up is dangerous for them. This understanding allows for more precise interaction. You don't touch certain areas carelessly, and you don't take everything as a personal attack. It's also an invitation to observe yourself. Your own quick reactions show where there is still inner work to be done. Where you react with disproportionate intensity, there is often unresolved history. Spontaneous emotion is like a crack through which psychological truth peeks. When you start paying more attention to reactions than planned actions, people become more understandable. You see not only what they want to show, but also what slips out when they let their guard down. And in that brief but honest moment, the most valuable information about who they truly are inside emerges. Truth número 7. What they criticize in others betrays them. Projection exposes internal conflicts. The harshest criticisms a person makes of others are often disguised reflections of themselves. The human mind has a particular way of protecting its self-image. When a personal trait is difficult to accept, it's easier to see it reflected in others than to acknowledge it within. This mechanism is called projection. It's not a conscious act of hypocrisy, it's an automatic way of displacing something internal that causes discomfort. Observe how someone overreacts to certain behaviors in others. If a person becomes deeply irritated by the arrogance of others, they might be struggling with their own unspoken desire for recognition. If they harshly criticize weakness or sensitivity, perhaps they are rejecting their own vulnerability because they learned that showing it was dangerous. What generates the greatest emotional charge is rarely neutral. It usually touches on an unintegrated part of oneself. This don't mean all criticism is projection. Some behaviors are objectively harmful. The key lies in emotional intensity and repetition. When someone repeatedly focuses on the same flaw in another person, with persistent anger or constant mockery, there is likely an underlying internal conflict. The criticism ceases to be observation and becomes an outlet. Projection also works in positive ways. People intensely admire qualities they wish to develop but don't allow themselves to. Someone who idolizes the freedom of others might feel trapped in their own life. Someone who extols the security of others might yearn for a confidence they haven't built. Both intense admiration and aversion point to active inner zones. This mechanism explains why two people can see the same individual in completely different ways. One sees them as confident, another as arrogant. One perceives them as reserved, another as cold. Each observer filters reality through their own internal world. We don't just see what's in front of us, we see what resonates with our experiences, fears, and desires. When you understand projection, you stop taking all criticism as objective truths. If someone intensely accuses you of something that don't fit your actual behavior, they might be talking more about themselves than about you. This don't eliminate the possibility of examining your behavior, but it prevents you from absorbing others' judgments as absolute truths. The other person's reaction contains information about their emotional makeup. It also changes how you listen to your own criticism. When someone bothers you repeatedly, you can ask yourself, what part of this bothers me so much? Is there something about me self-reflected here? This exercise isn't about blaming you, but about expanding your awareness. What upsets you most often points to internal issues that need attention. Projection keeps people from self-knowledge. As long as the problem is outside, there is no need to look inward. That's why it's such a persistent mechanism. Recognizing it requires honesty and tolerance for seeing aspects of oneself that don't align with the ideal image. When you observe this pattern in others, your reading becomes deeper. Criticism ceases to be mere opinions and become clues about unresolved inner conflicts. You begin to hear not only what they say about others, but what they are unwittingly revealing about themselves. At that point, judgment transforms into understanding, and understanding into psychological clarity. Truth número 8. Silence also communicates. Avoiding topics is an indirect confession. Not everything that reveals a person is expressed in words. Often, the most significant things appear in what they choose not to say. Silence isn't empty, it's compressed information. When someone systematically avoids certain topics, quickly changes the subject, or answers vaguely where they were previously detailed, they are signaling a sensitive emotional territory. A direct confession isn't necessary to notice that there is something there to protect. People usually speak fluently about what they have internalized. They can describe their tasks, plans, opinions, or experiences without visible tension. However, when a topic touches on insecurity, guilt, shame, or unresolved pain, the mind activates defenses. Silence appears as a form of control. If it isn't spoken about, it isn't exposed. If it isn't named, it seems not to exist. But this constant avoidance is, in itself, a clear sign. Observe what happens when certain topics are mentioned: past relationships, family, money, failures, important decisions. Some respond naturally, others tense up, change their tone, make a joke to deflect, or respond with general phrases that say nothing concrete. This isn't accidental. It's a mechanism to prevent someone from entering an area where they feel vulnerable or being judged. Silence acts like a closed door. This doesn't mean that all reserve is negative. Everyone has a right to privacy. The difference lies in the energy that accompanies the silence. Calm privacy doesn't generate discomfort, it simply establishes a clear boundary. Defensive avoidance, on the other hand, is accompanied by tension, a rush to change the subject, or irritation at neutral questions. In that case, silence isn't a serene choice, it's protection from something that hurts or threatens one's self-image. This is also seen in group dynamics. There are topics that are never addressed in certain families or teams: old conflicts, mistakes, inequalities. The group collectively learns not to name them in order to maintain an appearance of harmony. However, what remains unspoken continues to influence behaviors, tensions, and decisions. The shared silence stands an incomplete narrative. Learning to read silence changes your understanding of relationships. If someone avoids talking about commitment but enjoys emotional closeness, their silence about the future is telling. If someone talks about success but never mentions how they feel, their omission signals emotional disconnection. You don't need to force answers, simply notice which areas are consistently left out of the conversation. Silence can also appear after a significant event. A cold reaction to something that would normally elicit emotion, a lack of response where there was previously interest, a prolonged pause before replying. These absences of expression often indicate internal processes that the person cannot yet, or does not want to, verbalize. Observing what goes inside requires patience and sensitivity. It's not about pressuring or interpreting with paranoia, but about recognizing that human communication includes significant omissions. Sometimes, what someone avoids mentioning reveals more about their fears, guilt, or conflicts than an elaborate explanation. When you incorporate silence into your reading of people, your perception becomes more complete. You stop relying solely on explicit statements and begin to consider the empty spaces as part of the message. And in those spaces, often, lies the truth that has yet to find where to reveal itself. Block 3. The insecurities that motivate people. Truth número 9. The need for attention reveals a lack. Who seeks external validation, doubts internally. The constant need for attention rarely stems from insecurity, but rather from unspoken doubt. Those who need to be seen, approved of, and reassured all the time are, deep down, trying to soothe insecurity they can't resolve internally. External validation becomes an emotional band-aid. It provides temporary relief, but doesn't cure the underlying cause. Emotionally stable people may enjoy recognition, but they don't depend on it to feel valued. Their sense of self doesn't crumble if they don't receive applause, likes, or praise. On the other hand, when someone goes to excessive lengths to get attention, speaking louder, exaggerating stories, constantly showing off achievements, or dramatizing situations, they are often trying to convince themselves of their worth. This need manifests in subtle behaviors, frequently checking who reacted to something they posted, repeatedly mentioning their successes in unrelated conversations, interrupting to shift the focus back to themselves, or becoming uncomfortable when they are not the center of attention. It's not simple vanity, it's often insecurity seeking relief. If external validation disappears, so does the fleeting sense of worth. Attention functions as a temporary confirmation of existence and relevance. If they look at me, I matter. But when that feeling depends solely on external factors, the person becomes trapped in an endless cycle. They need more exposure, more approval, more signs that they are enough. And since no amount of external validation can fill an internal void, the search never ends. This is also seen in those who adopt striking or controversial identities simply to generate a reaction. It doesn't matter if the attention is positive or negative, what matters is not being ignored. The silence of those around them can feel like rejection because it triggers an internal belief of not being enough on their own. Paradoxically, the more someone seeks approval, the more fragile their self-esteem becomes. They depend on factors beyond their control, other people's opinions, tastes, trends. Any criticism is perceived as a threat, any lack of recognition as a sign of personal failure. Emotional stability becomes impossible when honest identity is in the hands of the public. Observing this dynamic in others helps us understand reactions that might otherwise seem exaggerated. A minor criticism can provoke an intense defensiveness. Indifference can generate even greater attempts to stand out. It's not the event itself that hurts, but what it triggers internally, self-doubt. However, this truth is not a judgment, it's an understanding. Everyone, at some point, has sought validation from others because of insecurity within. The difference lies in whether that attention is a healthy complement or a constant need to maintain self-esteem. When a person learns to recognize themselves without relying on the reflection of others, their need for attention diminishes. They can express themselves, share achievements, and enjoy recognition, but they no longer need it to feel sufficient. Their worth ceases to be measured by public opinion and begins to be built from their own internal perception. Interpreting the need for attention as a sign of lack allows you to see beyond the surface. Being the noise, there is often someone trying to fill an emotional void. And understanding this transforms how you interpret behaviors that, at first glance, seem like mere ego, but are actually insecurity crying out for reassurance. Truth número 10. The desire to please is a fear of rejection. Pleasing is a social survival strategy. The urge to please doesn't always stem from kindness, often it arises from fear. Fear of not being accepted, of causing discomfort, of losing connections, of being excluded. From a young age, people learn that acceptance brings security and that rejection hurts, sometimes deeply. Therefore, pleasing others becomes a strategy for emotional and social survival. Those who constantly need to please are often reading their surroundings not to express themselves authentically, but to adapt and avoid friction. They adjust their opinions, soften boundaries, say yes when they want to say no, laugh when they don't find something funny, and remain silent when something makes them uncomfortable. Not because they lack judgment, but because the emotional cost of being rejected feels too high. This behavior is reinforced when acceptance has been conditional in the past. Affection only when one behaved well, approval when expectations were met, attention when no problems were created. The implicit message that takes root is, to be loved, I must be convenient. Over time, the person stops asking themselves what they truly want and begins to wonder what others expect of them. The problem is that trying too hard to please disconnects a person from themselves. They live according to the reactions of others. Their decisions don't stem from inner desire, but from social calculation. Will they like this? Will they be upset? Will it look bad if I say no? This constant vigilance generates anxiety, because the environment is never completely predictable. Furthermore, being agreeable doesn't guarantee genuine acceptance. Sometimes it only fosters superficial relationships based on utility or convenience. Others can become accustomed to receiving without considering the boundaries of the person who always gives in. And when that person finally tries to set a boundary, the change is surprising and can generate conflict, confirming their fear of rejection, even though the real problem was a stand lack of authenticity. Observing someone who tries too hard to please others reveals clear signs: difficulty saying no, excessive apologies, downplaying their achievements to avoid causing discomfort, changing their stance depending on who they with, or taking on responsibilities that aren't theirs. It's not a weakness of character, it's a learned defense mechanism. Paradoxically, the more someone tries to avoid rejection through compliance, the further they distance themselves from genuine connections. Deep relationships are built on authenticity, not constant adaptation. When a person never shows disagreement, need, or boundaries, others don't truly know them. Fear of rejection also distorts perception. Any neutral gesture can be interpreted as disapproval. A brief message, a distracted glance, or a serious tone can feel like signs of imminent rejection, triggering further attempts to please. This creates a cycle of anxiety and social overexertion. Understanding this dynamic changes how certain behaviors are interpreted. Being the person who always helps, never contradicts, and seems perfect, there might be someone exhausted from maintaining an image designed to avoid exclusion. They aren't trying to control others, they're trying to secure their own place. When someone begins to accept the possibility of not pleasing everyone, something profoundly changes. They discover that some bonds weaken, but others become more authentic. They learn that the occasional rejection don't destroy their self-worth. And little by little, pleasing others ceases to be an urgent need and becomes a conscious choice, not a survival strategy. Truth número 11. Fakeness superiority is fragility. Feeling more often hides feeling less. The need to appear superior rarely stems from genuine inner security. Those who feel truly grounded don't need to constantly prove they are above others. Often, the superiority displayed is a defensive construct. A psychological armor designed to mask a silent sense of inadequacy. The human mind seeks balance. When someone perceives themselves internally as less, the temptation arises to compensate externally with an image of more intelligent, more successful, more cultured, more capable. This exaggeration is not accidental. It is a way of avoiding confronting the inner wound that whispers, I am not enough. It's noticeable in small gestures, unnecessarily correcting others, turning every conversation into a competition, minimizing others' achievements, using sarcasm to belittle, or constantly mentioning their own merits unprompted. It's not simple arrogance, it's insecurity protecting itself through image control. Fakeness superiority also creates emotional distance. Positioning oneself above others avoids the vulnerability of being on the same level. If someone appears unapproachable, they reduce the risk of being evaluated as an equal. It's easier to criticize than to expose oneself. More comfortable to point out mistakes than to allow others to see on his own. This attitude often develops when self-esteem is based on constant comparisons. If personal worth depends on being better than, then identity becomes tied to competition. The problem is that there will always be someone more skilled at something. This forces one to maintain a mask of superiority permanently, which generates tension and defensiveness. When someone with this inner fragility perceives a threat, someone talented, confident, or admired, they might react with disdain or mockery. Not because the other person has done anything wrong, but because it triggers a comparison that jeopardizes their fragile self-image. Discrediting the other person is easier than confronting their own insecurity. Paradoxically, the more someone tries to appear superior, the more dependent they become on comparison. Their worth isn't intrinsic, it's relative. They need others to be below them to sustain their sense of being above. This turns every interaction into a battleground where their identity is at stake. Truly confident people can recognize the virtues of others without feeling threatened. They don't need to belittle themselves to stand out. They can say I don't know, they can learn, they can make mistakes. Authentic humility is a sign of strength because it implies that personal worth doesn't crumble in the face of imperfection. Viewing fakeness superiority as a sign of fragility changes the interpretation of many attitudes. Being the condescending tone might be a fear of not being good enough. Being contempt, insecurity. Being excessive pride, a self-esteem that depends too heavily on external validation. This don't justify harmful behavior, but it makes it understandable. And understanding allows us not to take it personally. The need to appear superior speaks more to the internal conflict of the person exhibiting it than to the true worth of those around them. When a person stops striving to appear more and begins to accept that they don't need to be comparatively superior to have value, the tension diminishes. Identity ceases to be an arena of competition and becomes a space of authenticity. And at that point, true security emerges, quiet, stable, and without needing to be proclaimed. Truth número 12. Excessive control stems from fear. Who controls everything, fears losing everything. The desire to control everything rarely stems from calm, it usually arises from anxiety. Control is an attempt to reduce uncertainty, and uncertainty triggers one of humankind's deepest fears, the feeling of vulnerability. When someone tries to monitor everything, anticipate everything, and decide everything, they are often not seeking power, but security. Life is inherently unpredictable. People change, circumstances shift, plans fall apart. For someone who struggles with uncertainty, this reality feels threatening. This leads to the impulse to over-organize, plan every detail, monitor others' behavior, and minimize any unpredictable variables. Control becomes an illusion of stability. This pattern is seen in relationships, work, and personal life. People who need to know where the other person is at every moment, who check every step of a project without delegating, who get anxious if something doesn't go exactly as planned. It's not efficiency, it's fear disguised as responsibility. Excessive control often stems from experiences where the person felt loss, chaos, or a lack of protection. When something significant slipped out of their control in the past, a betrayal, abandonment, or failure, the mind learns that if it don't control, it loses. From then on, it tries to prevent pain by controlling every detail of the present. However, this strategy comes at a cost. Controlling everything is impossible. Mental energy is depleted, tension builds, and relationships suffer. To surround a controlling person might feel watched, restricted, or distrustful. Paradoxically, the attempt to avoid loss can generate exactly what is feared: estrangement, conflict, or broken relationships. Furthermore, rigid control hinders adaptation. When someone clings to an inflexible plan, any change is perceived as a threat rather than an opportunity. Creativity diminishes, spontaneity disappears, and life becomes a system of constant prevention instead of an experience. The fear that sustains control is often silent. Fear that things will go wrong, that others will fall, that one will be hit, that one won't know what to do if something goes wrong. Because these fears aren't always consciously acknowledged, the person justifies their behavior as doing things right or being responsible without noticing that the root cause is anxiety. Interestingly, the more someone tries to control, the more aware they become of everything they can't control. This increases feelings of insecurity. The mind seeks new areas to exert dominance, extending the cycle of tension. The relief that control promises is never lasting. People with greater emotional stability are not those who control more, but those who accept uncertainty as a part of life. They can plan, but they can also let go. They trust their ability to adapt, not their ability to foresee every detail. This confidence reduces the need for constant vigilance. Interpreting excessive control as fear changes the way we understand many behaviors. Beyond rigidity may lie a fear of suffering. Beyond constant demands, insecurity. Understanding this doesn't mean tolerating everything, but it does allow us to see that the behavior stems not only from a desire for dominance, but also from the difficulty of feeling secure without guarantees. When someone learns that they don't need to control everything to be safe, the tension decreases. They discover that safety doesn't come from dominating their environment, but from trusting their ability to face the unexpected. And at that moment, control ceases to be an obsession and becomes a flexible tool, not a permanent shield against fear. Block 4. The Psychological Mirror, Projection. Truth número 13. You see in others what you cannot resolve in yourself. Judgment is an unconscious self-portrait. The human mind does not observe reality neutrally, it interprets it through its own internal history. Therefore, what often bothers us most about others is not the behavior itself, but what that behavior triggers within the observer. Judgment of others is often a mirror reflecting unresolved personal conflicts. When someone reacts with disproportionate intensity to an external threat, arrogance, insecurity, laziness, need for attention, dependency, coolness, it's worth asking why it evokes such a strong emotional response. An intense reaction often indicates that it touches a sensitive spot, something the person recognizes, rejects, or represses within themselves. This mechanism is unconscious. It's not that someone deliberately thinks, what I'm criticizing is my own fault. On the contrary, the mind projects outward what it finds uncomfortable to admit internally. It's easier to see a flaw in someone else than to confront it within oneself. Thus, judgment functions as a psychological distraction. For example, someone who harshly criticizes those who seek attention might be struggling with their own need to be seen, but represses it because they consider it unacceptable. Another person who is irritated by the weakness of others might be denying their own vulnerability. What is not integrated internally often appears amplified in external perception. This don't mean that everything observed in others is imaginary. People do have real traits. But the emotional intensity of the judgment often reveals more about the observer than the observed. Two people can see the same behavior and react very differently, depending on their personal stories. Judgment also serves a protective function. Pointing out others' flaws can generate a momentary sense of moral or emotional superiority. I'm not like that becomes a form of self-affirmation. However, this rigid separation hinders self-knowledge because it keeps certain parts of one's identity hidden. When someone begins to see their judgments as internal quests, a profound shift occurs. Instead of simply thinking, that person is like that, the question arises, what part of this bothers me so much, and why? This question opens the door to emotional integration. Interestingly, as a person resolves internal conflicts, their judgment of others softens. Not because they stop seeing problematic behaviors, but because those behaviors no longer trigger them in the same way. Understanding replaces automatic reaction. A broader perspective emerges, one that recognizes everyone is grappling with complex internal processes. This principle also explains why some people repeatedly find themselves in the same kind of conflictive relationships. It's not just coincidence. Sometimes they are interacting with aspects they need to acknowledge within themselves. External life becomes a stage where internal conflicts are played out. Reading judgment as an unconscious self-portrait transforms how we relate to others. Every intense reaction becomes an opportunity for self-knowledge. What was once a merely outward criticism becomes inward-facing information. When someone stops using judgment as a defense and starts using it as a mirror, their self-understanding deepens. They no longer need to deny inner parts by projecting them onto others. And in that process, relationships become more conscious, because perception is no longer dominated by unresolved conflicts and begins to be based on a more integrated view of human nature. Truth número 14. What irritates you reveals your shadow. Strong emotions point to inner wounds. Intense irritation is rarely used about the present. When an emotional reaction is disproportionate to the event that triggers it, it's usually connected to something deeper. A wound, an insecurity, or an aspect of the personality that the person hasn't integrated. The shadow isn't what's bad, but rather what's being denied, what don't fit with the image someone has of themselves. Everyone constructs a conscious identity. I am patient, I am strong, I am independent, I am not like that. But everything that don't fit with that self-image don't disappear. It's displaced into an unconscious space. There, the shadow is formed. And that innate part tends to appear projected onto others, especially in the form of irritation. For example, someone who prides themselves on being rational can become very irritated with emotional people. Not because emotion is a problem in itself, but because it connects with a part of themselves that they are repressed. Another person who considers themselves generous might feel repulsion towards someone who sets clear boundaries, because it confronts them with their difficulty in doing so. Intense emotion is the sign. It's not outward behavior that defines the shadow, but the strength of the internal reaction. When something bothers you more than its soul, there is a story behind it. It could be a past experience, an unresolved insecurity, or a personal trait you've learned to reject. The shadow can also contain repressed positive qualities. Someone that's to be discreet might become irritated by confident and conspicuous people because, deep down, there is an unspoken desire to express themselves freely. What bothers them isn't always a flaw, sometimes it's an undeveloped ability. Denying the shadow don't eliminate it, it only makes it unconscious. And the unconscious exerts its influence without us noticing. Automatic reactions, immediate antipathies, and certain recurring conflicts are often connected to unrecognized inner parts. The mind prefers to see these aspects externally because it avoids the internal conflict of accepting them. When someone begins to see their irritation as a clue rather than used a justification, a door to self-knowledge opens. The question shifts from why is that person like that, to what part of me is triggered by this. This reflection reduces reactivity and increases awareness. Integrating the shadow don't mean acting on every impulse, but rather recognizing them as part of human nature. It means accepting that you can feel envy, neediness, fear, a desire for control, or insecurity without letting those feelings define your entire identity. This acceptance reduces the need to project. As someone integrates their denied parts, their tolerance for human diversity increases. What once provoked automatic irritation begins to be viewed with more neutrality or understanding. The energy previously spent reacting is freed up for conscious observation. Interpreting irritation as a dosing transforms our relationship with emotions. Instead of viewing them as external problems, they become internal information. Every strong reaction becomes an opportunity to uncover something hidden about ourselves. When the shadow is acknowledged, it ceases to control from the darkness. The person becomes more whole, less reactive, and more authentic. And by understanding their own contradictions, they can also better understand those of others, because they stop demanding an unrealistic perfection both externally and internally. Truth número 15. We admire what we wish to be, covert envy is also a clue. Admiration is not merely the recognition of another's qualities, often it reflects on his own unfulfilled desires. That which awakens a strong fascination usually points to something the person longs to develop, experience, or express within themselves. The emotion felt upon seeing someone excel is not only outward-facing, it also resonates internally. When someone observes another person who is confident, creative, disciplined, free, charismatic, or successful, admiration can be mixed with a feeling that's hard to name. Sometimes it's inspiration. Other times, a subtle discomfort. That discomfort is important. It can be a sign of untapped potential within oneself. Covert envy arises when the desire to be like someone else is mixed with a sense of distance between current reality and that ideal. Instead of acknowledging I want that though the mind might protect self-esteem by diminishing the other person's worth, they were lucky it's not that great, they must have hidden advantages. This reduces the internal tension of not being where one wants to be. This mechanism isn't a conscious malice, but rather a psychological defense. Admitting that someone represents something one desires implies acknowledging a lack or an unfulfilled goal. And that can trigger insecurity. Discrediting is easier than accepting honest and unfulfilled desire. However, genuine admiration, when observed honestly, becomes a compass. It reveals inner directions. If someone admires people who express themselves freely, perhaps there is a part of themselves that wants to break free from restraint. If they admire discipline, perhaps they yearn for structure. If they admire courage, there might be a desire to act with less fear. The key lies in distinguishing inspiration from destructive comparison. Comparison focused on like says, is that, and I am not. Conscious inspiration says, what is also possible for me in some way. The first paralysis, the second mobilizes. Envy, when acknowledged without judgment, is also informative. It points to an intense desire that has yet to find expression. It's not a pleasant emotion, but it is revealing. It indicates where a person feels their life could expand. Ignoring or denying it to eliminate it, it only transforms it into criticism or resentment. Often, what is most criticized in admired people is precisely what is most desired. Ambition can be ridiculed while deep down yearning for more. Public exposure can be dismissed while the desire to be seen is strong. The conflict isn't with the other person, but with oneself, wanting something different from what has been allowed. When someone begins to use admiration as a mirror instead of a point of comparison, something shifts. Looking at the other person ceases to be a threat and becomes a source of reference. The useful question then arises, what aspect of this appeals to me, and how can I develop it in my own way? This transforms honest relationship with the success of others. Instead of feeling that it diminishes honest own worth, it is perceived as proof of possibility. The energy previously spent comparing oneself to others or resisting success is now directed toward growth. Interpreting admiration and envy as internal clues allows for greater self-knowledge. They reveal the aspirations that are sometimes left unspoken. And when these aspirations are acknowledged, they cease to generate tension and begin to become a guiding force. Block 5. The Deceptions of the Human Mind. Truth número 16. People lie to themselves first. Self-deception precedes external deception. Before deceiving others, most people have already told themselves a story. The human mind has a remarkable ability to construct narratives that protect self-esteem, justify decisions, and smooth over internal contradictions. This self-deception is not always intentional. Often it is an automatic mechanism to avoid psychological discomfort. Accepting that one acts out of fear, insecurity, envy, or a need for valid action can be painful. Therefore, the mind translates these impulses into more acceptable versions. I did it out of a sense of responsibility. I'm just being honest. I'm saying this for their own good. That's just who I am. The real motivation demands hidden beneath explanations that preserve honest self-image. This internal distortion is so convincing that the person comes to believe it. They don't feel they are lying because their internal narrative has already been altered. When someone deceives themselves, their perception of reality adjusts to that narrative. From there, any deception of others arises almost as a natural consequence, not as a conscious plan. For example, someone who fears commitment might convince themselves that they haven't found the right person yet, when in reality they are avoiding vulnerability. Another might think they only demand excellence when their behavior is driven by a need for control. The mind prefers explanations that are consistent with honest self-image. Self-delusion also protects against guilt. If someone perceives themselves as a good person but acts selfishly, the internal tension is reduced by reinterpreting the action, y had no other choice, everyone else would have done the same, it was the best thing to do at the time. In this way, identity is preserved without confronting the contradiction. This mechanism isn't exclusive to a few, it's a general human tendency. The difference lies in the level of awareness. Some people question their own reasons, recognize contradictions, and examine their motivations. Others accept without question the first explanation their mind offers. The difficulty is that self-delusion distorts how we interpret situations and others. If someone sincerely believes they always act with good intentions, they may fail to notice how their actions negatively impact others. They don't see manipulation where it exists, or control where it does, because their internal narrative presents it as care or responsibility. Observing this pattern helps us avoid taking certain behaviors literally. People don't always lie with the intention to harm. Often they are reacting from a distorted version of reality that they themselves believe. This don't absolve them of responsibility, but it explains why rational dialogue sometimes fails to change behavior. The root lies in an unquestioned internal narrative. Deep self-knowledge requires tolerating discomfort. It means admitting that we don't always act for noble reasons, that we have conflicting impulses, and that our identity isn't always as coherent as we might like. This inner honesty reduces the need for self-deception. When someone learns to observe their own justifications with some detachment, they begin to detect where they are embellishing the truth. It's not about blaming oneself, but about seeing clearly. And the clearer the internal perception, the less need there is to maintain external deceptions, because coherence ceases to depend on an idealized image and is based on a more realistic understanding of human nature. Truth número 17. They believe their own story. Many are not pretending, they are convinced. Not all human contradictions stem from an intention to deceive. Often, people live within internal narratives so well constructed that they no longer distinguish between interpretation and reality. They don't act, they are convinced. Their personal narrative becomes a filter that organizes memories, justifies decisions, and defines who they believe themselves to be. The mind don't store facts as an objective record. It constantly reinterprets them to maintain consistency with honest identity. If someone perceives themselves as a victim, they will tend to remember events where they were treated unfairly and minimize moments in which they were responsible. If they see themselves as strong and independent, they might reinterpret their need for support as a mere preference or a passing circumstance. Over time, this narrative solidifies. Each new experience fits into the previous story. Contradictory facts are ignored, reinterpreted, or forgotten. Thus, the person don't feel they are distorting anything, their perception is genuine from their perspective. Conviction replaces doubt. This phenomenon explains why arguing with someone about facts don't always change their position. It's not just a difference in information, but in mental frameworks. When a fact threatens one's personal narrative, it's not experienced as a simple correction, but as an attack on one's identity. That's why the reaction can be defensive, emotional, or even aggressive. Internal narratives also serve as a psychological function. They give a meaning to life. They explain why certain decisions were made, why certain relationships were formed, why one is the way one is. Without this narrative, many people would feel empty or confused. Changing it involves revisiting the past and confronting uncomfortable aspects. This is evident in those who always have an explanation that leaves them in a favorable light. If something goes wrong, it's the fault of circumstances or others. If something goes right, it's proof of their ability. This isn't necessarily arrogance, it's consistency with the story they've constructed about themselves. This also works in reverse. Someone with a narrative of inadequacy may interpret successes as lack and failures as confirmation of their incapacity. The internal story isn't always favorable, but it continues to be defended because it feels familiar. Understanding that many people sincerely believe their version of events helps us avoid interpreting every disagreement as malicious intent. Two people can experience the same event and construct different narratives, both coherent from their internal perspective. The difference isn't always a deliberate lie, but rather an interpretation shaped by their identity. However, the rigidity of these narratives limits growth. When someone doesn't question their own narrative, they repeat patterns, the same decisions, the same conflicts, the same justifications. The story becomes destiny. The change begins when the ability emerges to see honest on history as used that, a construct. Not absolute reality, but one interpretation among several possibilities. This distance allows for a re-examination of beliefs, the assumption of responsibility, and the rewriting of aspects of one's identity. Those who manage to loosen their internal narrative become less defensive, more open to learning, and more aware of their own distortions. And by understanding that others are also living within their own stories, they develop a broader perspective. Not everything is pretense, often it's a deep conviction based on a version of reality that feels completely true to them. Truth número 18. A who does not know himself, acts from fear, and consciousness is the root of behavior. Much of human behavior stems not from conscious decisions, but from automatic impulses driven by unacknowledged fears. When a person lacks deep self-awareness, their insecurities, wounds, repressed desires, and emotional patterns, their actions are often reactions, not choices. And the silent root of many of those reactions is fear. Fear of not being enough, of being rejected, of losing control, of not being loved, of failing, of being alone. These fears aren't always present as clear thoughts. They operate as internal forces that shape decisions, attitudes, and relationships. The person believes they are choosing freely, but in reality, they are avoiding feeling something that they perceive as threatening. For example, someone might appear distant not because they don't care about connection, but because they fear emotional dependence. Another might overwork not only out of ambition, but also out of fear of feeling useless. Someone might be domineering because they are afraid of losing control, or compliant because they are terrified of rejection. Visible behavior is used the outer layer, the underlying motivation is often defensive. Unconsciousness amplifies these patterns. If a person doesn't recognize what drives them, they can't question it. Their reactions feel natural or that's just who I am. But that identity is often a set of protective strategies learned in the past and automatically repeated in the present. Unconscious fear also distorts perception. Neutral situations are interpreted as threats, minor criticisms as rejection, and differences of opinion as personal attacks. From this internal state, life is lived defensively. Decisions are not based on what one wants to build, but on what one wants to avoid feeling. This mechanism explains why some people repeat similar relationships, conflicts, or recurring failures. It's not simply bad luck, these are patterns driven by unresolved emotions. The unconscious keeps the same script active, even when circumstances change. Self-awareness breaks this cycle. When someone begins to honestly observe their reactions, asking themselves what they are truly feeling and where it comes from, fear loses some of its control. Naming an emotion reduces its automatic power. What once directed from the shadows becomes something that can be observed. With awareness, a person begins to notice the moment when the defensive impulse arises, the need to flee, to control, to please, to attack, to shut down. This moment of observation creates a space between emotion and action. And in that space, the possibility of choosing a different response emerges. It's not about eliminating fear, it's part of the human experience. The difference lies in whether it governs from the unconscious or whether it's recognized and integrated. When it becomes conscious, it ceases to be an invisible director and becomes a signal that can be heard without automatically obeying. Those who don't know themselves live reacting. Those who observe themselves begin to act with greater freedom. Unconsciousness reduces life to repeated patterns. Consciousness opens possibilities. And as a person understands themselves better, their decisions is to be dominated by old fears and begin to align with a clearer understanding of themselves and the reality that surrounds them. Epilogue, the true way to read someone. Reading someone don't begin by looking outward, but inward. Your perception of others is colored by your own experiences, wounds, expectations, and fears. If you don't recognize this internal filter, you believe you're seeing the other person clearly, when in reality you're seeing a mixture of who they are and what you project onto them. That's why understanding others begins with understanding your own reactions. Every time someone inspires immediate trust, automatic rejection, intense admiration, or disproportionate irritation, you're not only gaining information about that person, but also about yourself. This duality is what makes human observation profound. Observing without judgment is a rare skill because judgment is automatic. The mind quickly categorizes, right or wrong, strong or weak, trustworthy or dangerous. But judgment closes off perception, observation or open it. When you observe without rushing to conclusions, you begin to notice patterns, how someone reacts under pressure, what topics they avoid, when their energy shifts, when they need validation, how they treat those who offer them no benefit. That information is worth more than any discourse. It's not about justifying all behavior, but about seeing it clearly before labeling it. Clarity comes when you separate fact from interpretation. It's also essential to distinguish between manipulation and understanding. Manipulation is using psychological knowledge to control others' reactions for personal gain, ignoring the emotional impact on them. Understanding is using that same knowledge to relate more consciously, anticipate hurt feelings, communicate better, and avoid unnecessary conflicts. The difference lies not in skill, but in intention. Two people can perfectly read someone's fear. One will use it to pressure, the other to avoid hurting them. True emotional maturity is evident when understanding fosters responsibility, not selfish advantage. When you learn to read people with awareness, you stop taking everything personally. You understand that many of their reactions stem from their own fears, histories, and wounds, not from your true worth. This don't mean tolerating disrespect, but rather interpreting situations with greater accuracy. The guttematic offense transforms into an emotional reading. This speaks to their insecurity. This is their way of protecting themselves. This is fear in disguise. This clarity reduces mental strain. The real advantage of being able to read people isn't the power over them, but inner stability. You no longer depend so much on their approval, their mood swings don't disorient you so much, and you don't idealize or demonize them so easily. You see nuances. You know that someone can be kind and insecure at the same time, strong and fearful, confident in one area and fragile in another. This more complete view avoids unrealistic disappointments and distorted expectations. Emotional clarity also improves your decision making. You know when someone is acting from authenticity or from fear. You recognize when a relationship is based on need and when on choice. You detect inconsistencies between words and patterns without constant confrontation. This perception allows you to approach consciously or calmly distance yourself. Reading someone, in its deepest sense, isn't about guessing thoughts, but about understanding human dynamics. And the more you understand yourself, your shadows, your defenses, your desires, the less you distort what you see in others. External reading becomes more accurate because internal reading is more honest. Ultimately, true skill is not in uncovering hidden secrets, but in seeing with less illusion and more understanding. This perspective don't harden, it fosters awareness. And from this awareness, relationships is to be a game of assumptions and become interactions where emotional clarity guides every step. So, if this audiobook inspired you and you're ready to delve deeper into your personal growth and inner transformation, I invite you to discover another eye-opening audiobook that will change the way you see the world, your decisions, and your potential. Click here, and I see you there.